Hello, and welcome to the Physical Therapy Owners Club podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Shields, and I've got a guest, the CSO, Chief Science Officer of Cipher Skin, James Heather's with me today. James, thanks for joining us.
How are you, Nathan?
I'm doing well, thanks.
Thanks for having me. I get to do a lot of podcasts, but I like doing PT podcasts because people have a tendency to ask questions for things they need to know and not invite me to speculate wildly, which it's something that I occasionally do. So it's nice to be able to sort of put the whole thing to rights and do something useful. Let's be useful.
That's the whole goal. We're going to be talking about something that's relatively new in the physical therapy space, remote Therapeutic Monitoring, RTM, because this is relatively new in the space and it's been recognized by CMS. First of all, tell us your relationship to remote therapeutic monitoring and where you're coming from.
Hell yeah. Okay, well, let's just do the whole thing like from right now working backwards. So I have been thinking about this since well before the codes came out that allowed people to bill remote therapeutic monitoring through the regular CMS mechanisms that hopefully everyone is familiar with. If you're not, you have some pamphlets to read and none of the rest of this is going to make sense. So why would I care about that? Because I work for what you can think of as a medical device company. We explicitly make on-body measurement devices for physical therapists. They measure biometrics and joint angles. They port those directly to the computer or the tablet or the phone that you use in your practice, or at the very least you have in your practice, hoovers up all of that data, puts it in the right place, sends it to your EMR. So where does that come in? More or less, think of every individual exercise that you do, or more specifically, everything that you would later bill and justify in terms of how could all of that be written down for me? Mm-hmm. And also, how could I send someone home with said device into a context where they were not in clinic, the other 165 hours of the week where people are supposed to be doing their home exercise program.
Right.
So as might be expected, like most digital tools, because we offer the ability to be used in multiple different places and we are not tied down to being within the four walls and roof of an outpatient clinic, we think very long and hard about what happens when basically there's a regulatory unlock, we can call it that. So on the 1st of January this year, the RTM codes went live after a consultation period over 2021. We were ready. We were waiting because I'm the kind of boring person that reads the Federal Register. Hell yeah, strongly recommend that. I do things like that because I suffered through a PhD with only moderately affected my blood pressure at the time, and that sort of thing kind of sets the internal direction that we have within the company when it comes to how a PT is going to use the product later to bill stuff.
Right.
So that's the surface level explanation. Let's not dwell on the academic background stuff. There's lots of it. There's psychology, there's exercise physiology, there's human movement, there's digital signal processing, there's engineering, there's a whole lot of physiology. And I spent most of that time as a competitive strongman. So I've seen the inside of a PT clinic myself.
All right.
Yeah. On the thumb goes in, does that hurt part rather than the other bit.
Yeah, you know us well then.
I hope so.
So it is as of January 1st this year, these RTM codes came into play, and there's 5 of them, I believe. Is that correct?
Let's be really explicit about this. I don't know if you've got any speech language pathologists or OTs listening. I would say there's 5 that are specific to physical therapy.
There you go.
Actually, that might be stretching it. That might be stretching it a little bit. It all depends. I think there's 3 that are most important that people understand.
Okay. Where would you guide someone who wants to learn more of the details and the ins and outs of each of those codes and how to use them? Do you have some trusted sources you'd guide them towards?
Oh, if you're Googling around trying to learn how this works, anything that comes from a website where it's written by lawyers, because they're reasonably common in this area. If you're looking for someone to interpret the law from scratch when something like this happens, as might be expected, everyone with a small legal LLC who has interest in healthcare, medical devices, etc., immediately wrote about it because changes to CMS are interesting to people like me. Anyone who's a law partner or similar will do you proud when it comes to the interpretation of these things.
Oh, okay.
Now,
cool.
if you want to go deeper than that, and I don't necessarily recommend this for your time and sanity, you will have to read the actual government documents about it.
Okay.
And get to grips with it. And I know there's just a sigh was heard around the world as all of Nathan's listeners went, I'm not reading the Federal Register. Yeah. Who have you got on the show? Who is this guy? But unfortunately, a lot of the time, there is no other way through. New codes are scary, man, because a lot of the time there is surprising amount of gray area between what is written down and how that is understood and how that is eventually later translated into how should this be billed. And part of the lack of kind of aggression about immediately wanting to go, well, you know what, here's a new therapeutic modality. Obviously it works, it's just home exercise, right? But it's being tracked. We'll get to that. Part of the hesitance around that is the fact that no one wants to be audited. No one wants to be in a position where they have to spend any more time on the phone having another conversation about why did all I did was give him therapeutic exercise and a lollipop. Why can't you just let me build the units of therapeutic exercise like a normal PT with a normal job? I know everyone's been there. I've watched people do this from the other side of the room and gone, I didn't think I'd see anything today that made me glad I chose to be a scientist, which is usually something that I question. It's a lot, and you're going to get these drag factors. What that means a lot of the time is that a lot of information doesn't come back really quickly. There was I think it would have been about the middle of the year. I was speaking about this at the WebPT conference in May, and right after that I saw they released a bunch of figures, like how many people on the platform, it was public knowledge, you can probably Google to find this, how many people on the platform have billed these codes as kind of a basket of codes. And I would have said at that point in time, I remember it being about 15,000, but you'd have to go and look, which is very, very, very few codes when we're talking about reimbursements that range from between about $19 for the initial code, and we'll get to the structure of that later, through to about $41 for the actual interaction. Okay. So, yeah, 15,000 times that for a system that obviously has a really big position within an outpatient market means that people did not come out the same way we did on January the 1st and went, right, new CMS codes, let's go. Let's help people faster for money. No. So there's always a feeling out process of something like this. There's another component, responsibility. Yeah. And that's the thing that people like me who build the products and services that go around something like this have to come to the party, and then people need to know about it. Mm-hmm. And that's slow. Building hardware is difficult. That's why I call it hardware.
Yeah. The uptake for new modalities, new codes in the physical therapy realm, I can imagine being really slow. As a profession, I believe we're about a decade or two behind the curve on most technology. And so I can see where these new things, especially if there's any fear that this newness might lead to audits, man, we're going to keep it far away from us. But that's why I'm excited to have someone like you on, so you can tell us, okay, this is what it is. It's not a monster in the corner, but it is something that actually could be useful. And so when we're talking about remote therapeutic monitoring, you have wearables, if that's the correct term. People can wear these things to measure their biometrics. What are other ways in which you can utilize these codes outside of wearables? Is it utilization of an app or something like that justifies the code?
Yes, very good question. So if you go deep into this, and as might be implied by other people who aren't us, and we're not here to talk about my company, we're here to talk about the thing itself. So there's plenty of offerings from people who aren't us that are app-based. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, the therapeutic monitoring section of the code, obviously everyone gets remote, but the therapeutic monitoring section is the continual structured acquisition of PT-specific data over time. So it could be as simple as what essentially amounts to a carefully constructed survey that is trying to address all of the questions that you would ask if you called someone on the phone yourself for 30 seconds. I think that's the easiest way to think of it. Mm-hmm. Have you had any major difficulties with, at the high end, sport or activity, at the low end, activities of daily living, getting out of bed,
right,
through to what happened, how does it feel, pain out of 10, stiffness out of 10, presence or absence of tingling, pruritus, whatever. Mm-hmm. That also, according to the definition, is part of the potential service that you could provide for remote therapeutic monitoring.
And that can be done through an app-based program.
Yes.
That might not be your realm, but are there apps out there that you know of that you would recommend?
Here's the thing. I know they're out. I know they're out there too. I don't get to use them. Okay. We know they're there. Obviously, we do our own app development because you can't just have hardware sitting in the corner doing something without the ability to digitally access. As might be expected, like if you have a Garmin watch, you don't use all the information off the watch face. Well, Cipher Skin wearables are exactly the same. It all works through a digital interface that you can see. And the important components of that, basically retrieving the data from the device, sewing it together and structuring it and turning it into a report that is RTM capable at the end of that. So as might be expected, we already had the hardware. What we spent a lot of time thinking about is what features does this need to have in order to support the billing cycle?
Right.
Now, I'm telling you that because I'm 100% certain that anyone who's releasing just an app in that space has definitely thought about that as well. Mm-hmm. But they're not measuring things like, exactly you've got a frozen shoulder. Is your 17 days in? Exactly what is your shoulder flexion? 12 hours after yesterday's home exercise program. Right. How much did it hurt? Do you have anything to report? Do you want to request the fact that I'm going to talk to you through a synchronous interaction? Or also the other way around. If you're a therapist, you can text message or email people straight out of the app. So see nice. someone who doesn't have activity for 2 days. This is the inside of it. There's a roster. Person number 3. It's person number 3. It's the 17th. They haven't recorded any activity since the 14th. There's 2 problems with that. 1, they're supposed to be reporting their activity because that's how you help them. I think they call that healthcare. 2, they could be messing with your ability to get paid. So you're already doing the work. Beep, send the reminder.
Oh, okay.
So those features will be common to any mature app that is available to be able to do this. Yeah. Basically, what you want is something that has all of the available features. And if something says, "Well, we don't offer that," well, they probably should. I'd say Google until you find one that does, if that's all you want to do.
And I don't presume you to be a billing specialist, so I understand where you might have some hesitancy in answering this question. But so in your situation, so you have a wearable, say a sleeve for someone who has a shoulder issue, the frozen shoulder like you're talking about. You set them up, they're on the app, you're monitoring them as a physical therapist. At what point do you bill the RTM codes? Is it on the date of service that they come in for care? Is it a one-time per plan of care? Thing, or is it on the days in between visits?
Great question. So we were initially uncertain about this, and my understanding is, but this is also the conservative approach. My understanding is that after you have done the first kind of series of episodes of service and you get right to the end, you should batch bill the whole lot after they've actually been done. Now, I cannot make there are points. I told you there were elements of this that are unclear. I cannot make the very fine determination about, let's say there's a code that's for initial setup. It's called 98975. Okay. What one of our devices will do, right? So if you are a PT and you take a sleeve that is designed to do musculoskeletal monitoring, and you show it to someone, you show them the app that they have access to, you put it on them, you have them wave their arm around a bit, they say, that hurts, you say, I know that, that's why you're here, stop interrupting me. And eventually you get to a point where you feel like they're going to be okay with using the product that they've got while they're in a remote setting.
Right.
Okay, that's a billable episode.
Okay.
Because it's not a lot of money, but it is also, CMS obviously had to take into account the fact that you can't just give someone a box of hardware or an install of a piece of software and go, you'll figure it out. Generally, that's not how medicine works.
Sure.
Right? So in general, the people who have been using ours, because it's impossible to get it wrong this way, we have been recommending that you run the first sort of billing period until you're done, and then you throw the whole lot. In at once after the end of a 30-day period.
Oh, okay. So after a 30-day period, you would go back and add the CPT codes to previous visits, or just bill it on that 30th day?
You bill it all on the 30th day.
Bill it on the 30th. And okay, you account for. I'm assuming they're not timed codes like the other CPT codes we use.
Okay, so the first one isn't 98975 is not.
Okay.
98976. I always get 76 and 76 and 77 confused,
sure,
because they're pretty much exactly the same thing. Actually, it's 77. I told you I get them confused. The wording is almost identical, but one's for respiratory system monitoring and the other one's for musculoskeletal monitoring.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Right. So these are not timed because they are fully remote.
Okay.
What is happening for that code is that for every day in the way that everyone's familiar with them, one after the other, every time there's a recording that is giving you usable therapeutic data, the majority of those 30 days in order, having data being recorded on them, is the center of what makes the code billable. Okay. So those are very definitely, in that sense, it's untimed. It is a very small amount of patient time. It's not any of your time. Now, when we get to the timed code is 98980. Now, this is the time that you spent reviewing the data that people send you, and must include one synchronous interaction between you and a patient. Now, that can be anything you like, although I would caution everyone at this point in time, please check the legal status of using something like FaceTime to do medical care.
Yeah.
It is many of these things are not strictly approved, as you know. This was a little different during the pandemic, and it also changes with the individual rules that individual companies have with it.
And it could be okay now, but it's not going to be okay if you're listening to this in 2024.
Almost
or the other way around.
Certainly. Almost certainly.
Right?
So there's lots of different ways.
Yeah,
yes,
if you're going to do that virtually, be careful.
Yeah, use the right platform. But also bear in mind, when we're talking about synchronous communication, and a lot of the time we're talking about patients over the age of 65, especially if you're in a post-ortho world, as might be expected. Our stuff is for MSK conditions and post-operative recovery. So there's a lot of people over the age of 65. As might be expected, you call them on the phone, you're going to have a little bit better luck than Zoom for Business with many of them.
Yeah.
Right? It's easy enough to schedule as well. Certainly when I call my elderly parents and I call the actual phone in the house, they pick up with a frequency that would embarrass me in my own daily business life. They're good at that. They've learned. Right. So one synchronous interaction, phone, digital, web conference, otherwise. Asynchronous interactions don't count. Can't send a postcard, can't send an email, can't send a text message. That is not a synchronous interaction. That is an asynchronous interaction. Okay. So what we used to call back in the day, Nathan, talking to people. If you're actually doing that, and the amount of time between you looking at the data and trying to figure out how that impacts their progress over time and the synchronous interaction, that is a time code. The relevant amount of time is 20 minutes.
Okay.
Which doesn't sound like much until you have a full, heavy outpatient schedule and you're working 4 or 5 days a week, and you might have, I would say what would be, let's say you're working overlap somewhere at a PT clinic. There's lots and lots of people. You could have the worst I've ever heard is sort of like someone said, like, oh, I'm trying to do 130. Now, I think that was affected by the fact that you weren't talking about people who were coming in very, very regularly. There wasn't this 3 days a week business, or even sometimes 5 days a week business. So I think that artificially inflates the amount of individual people who are in that bucket.
Right.
But certainly, it feels like 6. I'm frankly amazed by PTs who can maintain like regular visits of sort of 60 people.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we've only got 15 people in Cipher Skin, and occasionally I'm like, who are you again? So you're actually you're treating and, you know, trying to maintain rapport and remember names, etc., and not get tired and throw a boast with all that. 60 individual people. Now, you can't find 20 minutes for each individual person within the 60. Right? And right now, I mean, the people that we talk to, the people that buy our stuff are busier than they've ever been, because there's an enormous backlog. I mean, simultaneously, we have a population that, because time continues to exist, continues to age, right?
Yep.
And then we have this tremendous backlog of both elective surgery that was cancelled or delayed a lot of the time, that's resulting in people who need post-surgical care, and also people who were manifestly inactive for the last couple of years, and also people who've been ignoring complaints that they already have over time, and sort of thinking, well, you know, I mean, that's obviously tailing down now, because in general, the restrictions that we had in 2020 and segments of 2021 are not really the case anymore. So most people, you know, it's a real problem. There's no question of I can't go outside, blah, blah, blah. It's more, you know, that's tailing off, but it's still happening to a certain degree. So
to come back around.
Yeah, like how many 20-minute chunks are we going to be able to add if you're already like you're running in the red? Here's the key, and I promise I'll shut up after this. I know I told you I was going to do this, and here we are. I think this is something that you need to be judicious with. Sure. And there are people who will benefit from it. We can get into that later, but there are people who will benefit from it. And there are people where I don't think it's going to help at all. So the whole idea of, hey, here's the thing, this is a remote whatever, I can potentially help people, definitely build on, they're all going to go off and do a thing, and it's not going to be a managed process, forget about it. Yeah, this is not the right thing to get all keen and mercantile on. Now, there's a lot of people who will benefit from it, but it's also a matter of your ability to support it as a professional and maintain a standard of care. Right. Yeah, so I hope you can appreciate I'm deliberately working against my own interests here. I want you to buy as much hardware as possible and take a whole bunch of measurements. But it turns out that the PT market is enormous, and of course, it works brilliantly for us. If patients have good experiences and PTs find the use of this straightforward, and so they're not maintaining an inventory of hundreds of devices or something like that, you quickly end up turning into an academic laboratory if you're going to try and do that. Right. No one's tried to do that yet, which is why it's working. Right. Which also, you know, affords me the ability to be completely honest about it. Which helps. Exactly. Right. And so just to clarify that picture for me, at that 30-day mark, and I know I'm coming back to the billing, but you could bill for this. At that 30-day mark, you could bill for the setup, the initial setup. And do you bill a code for each day in which there has been some data accumulated, or is there a singular code that covers all the data that's covered in that 30-day period? And then that's a very good question. That's a single code. That is one billing period of 98977. Okay, perfect. So there's the initial setup, there's the singular 9877, and then there's also the data interpretation and synchronous conversation with the patient regarding that time and how they've used it, right? Yes. Perfect. There's 3 important codes, but there's also 98981. If by you are one of those incredibly scrupulous people, or you've provided a very heavy-duty service, or you have low patient volume, or any number of other things, and you're somehow managing to spend 40 additional minutes, there is a repeat code that's 98981. Okay. But like most repeat codes, the second reimbursement is less money. So you can look all of them up, and there's no point telling you how much money it is because it's going to be different from, sometimes it's different between zip codes. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean, if you actually go to the CMS, look up and do that, you can see there, and there's a border there. You can see that PT is worth $6 more on that side of the line. And I've always wanted to find one of those and look on Google Maps just so I could find one that's on the wrong side, right, and mail them and thought, have you thought of going across the street and making 8% more?
Exactly. So in this situation, and if a therapist is thinking over, okay, how can I implement this to benefit my patient? Who is the ideal PT owner? And maybe a better question is, who is the ideal patient that would benefit from remote therapeutic monitoring?
Okay, so this is where we move from sort of process-driven discussion of what absolutely has to happen with codes for billing and money and the sort of market mechanics of everything. I move into my opinion. I do have one, but I'm telling you, this is my opinion, right?
Great.
So my mum is doing PT, and every single person listening to this podcast, my mum is your dream patient. Yeah? I don't think she's ever missed a home exercise program workout, ever. She was staying with me in our house a while back, and I walked out and found her using my Indian clubs. I have wonderful Indian clubs made out of cast iron that are much heavier than the regular ones. Yes, I'm one of those people. And I found her using those as weights to do little old lady deadlifts because she couldn't find anything else hanging around. So I came out, my heavily armed mother was standing there doing sort of like ski squats in the middle of the floor. Right? Yep. So she doesn't need anything I could possibly build her. She got a piece of paper, she printed it out, she had it laminated, she takes it with her on holidays. Right. Does my mum need RTM? She does not.
No.
Okay. Let's deal with the converse example. There's another person in my family, but I'm not going to say who. I don't think they'll hear this, but I'm not going to say who has a variety of musculoskeletal complaints, and I don't think has ever done any home exercise that has been prescribed to them ever. Right? So if you go to the trouble of getting access for something like this, you also have to bear in mind that there is a cost for you. And that's going to be true if you're buying access to software. It's going to be something that goes on your license. If you're buying stuff from us, then the hardware costs money. Of course, you get to keep the hardware. It's never going to be able to, you're not going to throw it away.
Right.
And if you break it, we'll replace it. So you always have access to the hardware if you buy it, right?
Yeah.
There's on one side, and that's not free. Neither is access over time, because there's an astonishing amount of back-end nastiness that has to be maintained to make sure all your data gets to the right place at the right time. So not free. Give it to someone who's not going to actually do anything with it. They're going to do exactly the same thing that they did with their Fitbit. They're going to put it in the kitchen drawer. Right? And then if you ask for it back, because the patients are not going to buy these are entirely reusable. And the nice thing about most injuries is at some point in time they go away and you don't have to do regular monitoring on them anymore. It would be irresponsible. And if you got audited, can you imagine? Let's say you've got a young, healthy person, 25, busted ACL from a mountain bike accident. They are incredibly motivated to get going again because they loathe being injured. It drives them crazy. They don't even really need to do PT because they're just going to push through everything as soon as humanly possible and get going.
Right.
Now, they will do a lot better with PT, but it's not a matter of like this is some barrier to access. Yeah?
Yeah.
If you give them measurement stuff over time, what do you think is going to happen after the first sort of 8 to 12 weeks? And the answer is they're never going to put it on again.
Right.
And that's why we have the model of it being your hardware that you get to keep, as might be expected. Because there's absolutely no chance we're going to go around selling these to people. I mean, only the sort of carbon fiber bike crowd would ever consider buying one of those.
Oh, sure.
So it has to be yours. So now we've dealt with the very diligent people and we've dealt with the not particularly diligent people. Now, I'm not going to put you on the spot and ask you to assign a sort of percentage number for those two groups. But I would say people like my mum at the top, I'd say that's probably about 5% of all the people.
That's true.
Right. and the people in the bucket down the bottom, where you can establish all the rapport you want, but they're just not going to do it because human beings are often lazy and self-interested. and more than anything, capable of the most astonishing amount of short-term thinking. Mm-hmm. We're not designed to plan out 20-week trajectories, Like me, I had a bowl of chili lime cashews that was sitting here on the desk, right? And I didn't plan to eat all of them, but I did in the first 70 seconds after I got them. That's about a third of people. A third of people are my cashews. Right, so now we can immediately throw 40% of the individual people away. Now, after this, what benefits from most strongly being monitored over time for progress, where you're sure that if you knew, and if you have people who are a participant in the recovery process, it's going to help. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot of people who are in the middle of that, who are essentially pre-converts, if you like. Mm. And I think that's your demographic. Okay. Because they're uncertain of it. I mean, every PT knows someone who's turned up in the first place, who walks in, into the room, trips over the massage table, gets tangled in the TheraBands, and goes, I don't even know what I'm doing here. I was told to come here, Right. Janice at the office, give me a kick and said, you need to go to PT, or my son did, or my aunt did, or the doctor gave me a solid talking to and said, you don't need bloody opioids, you need a physical therapist. And I got sent here for my lower back pain, but I don't know where I am, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know what my name is, right? Mm-hmm. That's your cat right there. Mm-hmm. The person who is waiting to understand what the process should be like and how it should be structured over time. Because there's obviously an element of hand-holding and the introduction to the culture and thought process that goes around how should we be maintaining ourselves over time.
Yeah, I see. So, yeah, the people, and especially those people who I could see where the competitive person, the person who's maybe that CrossFit type athlete or in some kind of sport, and sees a wearable in your case, or maybe the app that they're using to interchange or upload their information is kind of a game, a competition. Oh,
absolutely.
Better. Those type of
no. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. And you've totally presupposed my second demographic of people. But we call this anxiety leverage. Now, I promise you, just so you can sleep at night and because it's going to work better, you want to be a force for good when it comes to this over time. The last thing you want to do is take someone who is riddled with health anxiety, which is a surprising amount of people, and say, maintain this daily schedule of check-ins or you're doing it badly. That can be a lot for someone. Those people, David Sedaris wrote a great article many years ago about how he got addicted to his Fitbit. You don't want to do, you really are not on the side of the righteous if that's what you're going to do to be able to hand care out to people. I think you probably want to be on the side of not causing people health anxiety, right? Mm-hmm. So obviously there's like context and expectation setting, etc. And I think you want to reinforce the good enough rather than the sort of perfection of this over time.
Right.
And the measurements themselves are designed to support that. Mm-hmm. Right? You're supposed to take daily measurements for the first 30 days. When I say the first 30 days, I mean the majority of, which means a minimum of 16. Now, that's a lot of missed days. When I trained a lot, I trained 6 days a week, right? For a period during my master's where I spent a very long time trying to get my deadlift over 600 pounds, right?
Wow.
Because I thought it would help flipping tractor tires and lifting stones and stuff. I was convinced it was the key, right? So I was trained 6 days a week. Not heavy stuff every day. Generally for strongman, you have event stuff and you have muscle group stuff, a little bit like a bodybuilder, and you have powerlifting stuff. So generally you think of sort of planes of movement or sort of activities, right? I think I probably missed 3 workouts in 4 years.
Wow.
Right? just because it was, and do you know why? Because it was super convenient to go to the gym that was 150 meters from my office where I was all day, in a building where I had a shower and the ability to wash my clothes.
Mm-hmm.
That's what made the big difference. And some dumb obsession with a number. I don't even know what I got to. I can't even remember what I got to.
I was going to ask you, did you ever get to 600?
I did 585. I got to 500 on an axle, which I was always very happy with.
Ready to go.
Axle deadlifts, for those of you who aren't familiar with, like imagine a regular deadlift where someone was hitting both of your hands with a toffee hammer.
Ouch.
They're horrible.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
So, and then what are some of the benefits that you've seen with either your patients, your subjects, the test subjects that have used your wearables or have used other apps? Is there data out there, whether within your own company or outside of your company, that have shown the benefits to using these in patient care and their recovery?
Super good question. There's two answers. In the sense that we are doing this code right now in this context and measuring it, there's claims of efficacy that other people are making. I haven't read anything where that's actually been split down into numbers.
Okay.
No, they're not doing that because I have give me a quick Google and you'll find out what I've done in my scientific career when people publish numbers that are occasionally inaccurate. Some impertinent words have been said to that end, right? But it's not that. It's just the fact that like the eggs aren't cooked yet.
Okay.
Right? So someone will get to that in some capacity. I wouldn't want to try to do that yet because also you're proposing if you're going to do that in the first place, you have the issue of navigating health data. So I think it's likely to happen not in the RTM context, but in something that's a very good analog within a research group at a university. And that being said, we get to the second point, which is the fact that there is so much research on reminders and digital interventions, which is essentially what this consists of. There's one of the single best studied things in medicine. If you want bang for your buck, there's nothing like this in the entire study of the entire clinical pantheon world. There's nothing better than the SMS. Health text reminder studies. There might be more than 150 reviews on this because it's everything. It's remember to take your PrEP if you're HIV positive. It's remember to take your medicine because we changed the schedule from 2 of those to 3 of those every single day.
Wow.
It's remember to go and do it. And this has been endemic, this research within healthcare for years because researchers love looking at stuff that works. You get a high single-digit percentage change in compliance or adherence, depending on how you're talking about it. Reminding people who forget stuff at the time where they need to do something about it is a great option for anything.
Yeah.
So just from the perspective of will we get to see the data over time? I'll tell you something subjective from this.
Yeah.
The people that have done this, who've talked to me about it, and I've had a few of these conversations now, find it a little bit unusual for the first week or so.
Oh, okay.
And then at some point in time, the line starts to go up and it starts changing the way they feel about it. They become a participant in a process.
Once they start seeing that improvement.
Yeah. So let's say we've got a problem. We're abducting our shoulder, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not so great. And you're taking a measurement of that would be very, very trivial from one of our devices, just a regular kind of range of motion test.
Right. And
it's not so good. And then you see it get better. And then people aren't going to see this on the podcast. I'm waving my arms around like I'm doing semaphore on the deck of an aircraft carrier. But you can all imagine what's like when you have problems abducting your shoulder. And then it gets better over time. And you see that reflected day to day to day to day to day to day. And it's one of the rare things that you always want when it comes to the sort of behavioral entries into medicine, which is a virtuous cycle. and there ain't nothing like them.
Okay.
It's the same reason that Duolingo will reward you with that annoying bird when you start to hit a streak of multiple things over and over again. It's the same reason that online games will give you tremendous bonuses for playing 5, 10, 20, 30 days in a row.
Mm-hmm.
It's why everything that's got a reward mechanism and something like that has got rewards that are congruent to being able to pay attention over time, because people get stuck in the cycle. Access, look, understand.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you feel good about it.
Right.
You feel good about it, you're more likely to do it the next time.
Right. We're all about the reward.
Yeah.
Some of the acknowledgement, the recognition.
But also, it's you. It's something you immediately have access to. Let's say you have some horrible musculoskeletal problem and it's going away over time.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at a graph and you remember how you felt when it was 4 out of 5. And now you're there 3 weeks later looking at a 1.5 out of 5 and a line that's just going down and down, and it's got some lumps and bumps and then things happen. And there was that time you fell down the stairs, and the other time you tried to pick your neighbor's dog up and you forgot what a big bastard he was, and then you pulled it a bit, but it's going down, it's going down, it's going down, it's going down, and you're seeing it.
Yeah.
And it brings you into, like, there's a participative element of that when you're generating and looking at this data over time, where if you're using it to defray and not cause anxiety, it's super useful.
Gotcha. And so, and the last question I have, for the provider that's using it and they're interpreting the data, how would you coach them if they were looking at this data in front of them to assess it appropriately? Are they just simply looking for the trends over time and then maybe interacting with the patient to say, recognize, hey, just so you know, as you followed this program, especially as you did it in consecutive days, you saw great gains? I mean, is it simply a conversation like that, or how should they interpret the data and then interact with the patient?
It 100% can be.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel like that's the easy place to start with. That's the way that it's going to happen. I mean, it's entirely out of my hands. I know very few PTs compared to the entire sum of PTs in the market, right? So I don't have great context here, but I feel like that is where it's going to end up a lot of the time.
Okay.
You see someone miss a whole week, and then they eventually, maybe you cue them with an email or an SMS or a phone call or something, and you say, get back on the damn pony. Right? Yeah. And they do, and it's the same or it's worse. Then you know exactly what to tell them, which is, don't expect yourself to be perfect. I know there's obviously a context involved here. Now, we made absolutely no progress for this week. I want you to take that and I want you to bin it completely and have no emotional valence about it whatsoever, however you choose to. I wouldn't say have no emotional valence whatsoever to a 65-year-old with a knee replacement. I think the response would be, what's that, Sonny Jim, if it was me saying it. So, but however you want to say it. Right. To get yourself that context. Mm-hmm. Now, if you want to get cute with something like this, you can look at what an expected recovery trajectory would be, either from other people who have from the same sort of demographic with the same condition, for instance, or there's tons of research that will tell you what the actual expectations are of something over time. Or for instance, you've got you've got a condition and it's just stuck and nothing's changing for 3 weeks, and you're trying to figure out why. Also, bear in mind, you very rarely have one data set. Wouldn't it be strange? Wouldn't it be strange if someone was doing their remote therapeutic monitoring separate to their home exercise that they're both doing? Because RTM measurements a lot of the time is like 30 to 60 seconds, right? It's a check-in in the same way that I would get remote blood pressure is a really, really good example for remote physiologic monitoring.
Interesting.
Yeah, you can think of it like that. Right. So they're doing that. They're also doing the home exercise. I mean, without stuff, you can cue and record the home exercise and send that if you want. Yeah, but you're doing all this and nothing's changing for 3 weeks. I would start asking questions.
Right.
Yeah, because also bear in mind the thing that's really going to happen with this, and the place where repeat business comes from, the place where reputation comes from, a lot of the time is built out of the ability to find signals from complex data faster. And this is dramatically increasing your at-bats when it comes to what can I see within the information that's been presented to me. Because you're not talking about a very fast Oxford thing like once a week to be able to see how the whatever is doing, Throw your arm up. Oh, yep, it still seems like it rotates. It's still stuck on. Look at that. Okay, well, fair enough. We've got our program. Let's go. It's very different to, like, for instance, this is the last 40 days worth of measurements with everything laid out. You can see. And you but a PT with a reasonable degree of experience will just tell you what feels right.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yep.
Now, as a data person, that gives me the cold sweats. But that's just a different perspective. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the time, when you go, look, I can feel that I know it's working. But more than that, it's a subjective perception of someone that you're dealing with. You've got a little bit of range of motion improvement, but a lot of improvement in pain, but also you feel a lot better about it because it's being dealt with over time.
That's right.
This is, if you want to do your biopsychosocials, like PT is definitely the time. Mm-hmm. People love saying that word without following through and thinking about all the pieces of what it means. I think they just like the fact that it's got a lot of syllables.
It does. So Thank you so much for taking the time to explain a lot of it and how it could be implemented and what the ideal patient might be, and even down to how it's built. One of the last questions, because we are talking to PT owners out there. What's the monetary investment in either in apps or in wearables that you've come across?
I don't know how a lot of the apps are priced. I would, knowing the space though, I would think that they'd be bundle priced, and that if you put an individual person on it, you would have kind of a licensed tier, and that would mean that rolling an individual person would cost money per time, money per person, or money per session. Oh, okay. Probably not money per session, because the session's going to be all over the place with different people.
Right.
You have to bear in mind at this point in time that for our device, this is about a quarter of all the stuff that it can do. So there is a whole range of in-clinic measurements and observations that are designed for regular measurements during initial assessment, therapeutic exercise, biofeedback, musculoskeletal testing to a certain degree, although that's an astonishingly complicated and irritating code, and I understand why all of you hate it. So it's very difficult to build a full service thing that lets you bill it more easily, because I know PTs want to do it, but a lot of the time they can't access the damn code because the requirements are so abstract.
That's right.
See, I am learning about your world. Now, this is me over justifying the fact that I'm going to tell you that they're $4.99. Not with a dot, with dollars, okay. $499. And there is an access charge over time, which comes up on a monthly basis.
Yeah, I would assume.
Now, the thing that we will do for that, which is not just obviously give you the stuff, and if it breaks, very definitely get you one that doesn't as soon as humanly possible, because hardware companies loathe that. We want everything to be perfect all the time. We're all weird perfectionists. But the thing that we've started doing recently, which I think has been very well received, is we will help you get to a point of using it where it's making you money.
That's awesome.
So is it a matter of who's coming in? Even to the grainy level of, can you give me advice about how this might be billed? What could we measure? What the sort of patients are? And if you try and buy too many of them, we'll tell you don't need that many and you should buy fewer. Because it's obviously terrible for us. If you stick 5 of them in the corner and you use 3 because you bought 8, that's obviously a bad thing for both of us. Mm-hmm. What we want is for you to make money with the thing that we sell you. Mm-hmm. That's what makes the world go around.
Right.
And if you have a bad experience with it, then you won't turn them on and bill for it. But the whole point is, we need you to be making money with it.
Cool.
That's what we're designing it to do.
If people want to check it out, videos of it, your website, where can they go?
Cipherskin.com.
Cipher Skin.
It's that easy. If you've got show notes, you can put it in. Look, I even wore the shirt today. Look at that.
There it is.
Yeah. I usually like paint the fences or something in these, and wear a nice heavy metal shirt to meetings just so people know what's up.
Well, and just so you guys know, if you're listening, Cipher is CIPHER skin.com.
Oh, good qualification. Yes.
Yeah. CIPHER. And if people want to reach out to you, are you on social media, James? Or
I'm everywhere. I'm one Google away from infecting your whole life with my nonsense. You can find me. Yeah, I don't use Facebook anymore because I don't like them much. But I'm Twitter. Yes, you can find me through the Cipher Skin website, obviously. Other stuff as well. This is honestly, it's one of those things. I have a link tree. If you find that, you'll find about 12 different ways to find me. I'm anonymous.
All right. Great. Well, James Heathers, thanks for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, look, this has been fun. I like talking about this. I'll say something very brief in closing.
Please.
I feel like the way that biomedicine is set up, and the way that a lot of technology has been structured, I feel like both of these things have been quite dismissive of PTs as a profession and as a culture. And I get the sense that people feel like they're being disrespected. And I would like to do the exact opposite of that, which is one of the main reasons that this whole sort of tranche of work, because obviously I've not told you about any of that. I mean, I do R&D stuff all day. I think about building things for the government and building things for private companies, a lot of which I can't tell you about. But this is the center of this. Is I'm glad that I'm helping the people who are probably going to hear this, because I see a tremendous value in it. And as I suppose scientists, technologists, whatever the hell you want, I mean, I wish people who did what I did respected you more. And I really am trying to, I really am trying to build something that is going to add value to this world that you're trying to work through. I was astonished by how hard it was when I started learning about it in the first place. You know? Mm-hmm. It was a lot, but it also isn't something that occupies the sort of popular narratives about how medicine, how healthcare is hard. I suppose what that amounts to is I hope you enjoyed this, and I'm glad I did it.
Well, I'm really grateful that you have that mindset for our profession in general. I totally agree. I think there are aspects within the healthcare community and scientific community that disregard physical therapists and their efforts and their benefits to the community at large. So having you on our side is a good thing.
Well, yeah, here's hoping. That could only go well, right?
I have faith in you, James.
Appreciate it, Nathan. It's good to meet you.
Again, thanks for your time, man.